Now, coalitions have become the dominant local government model in the country, but they seem to be unraveling at all ends. Is there a better way to navigate cooperation between parties from a policy and governance vantage point? Well, the DA's Zakhele Ndlovu once described coalitions as a little more than extortion rackets, where tiny parties offer support to the highest bidder. Well, let's discuss this further with political analyst Zakhele Ndlovu. He's a lecturer in politics and public policy at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Mr. Ndlovu, good morning and thank you very much for your time. You know, for many, the instability and no confidence motions are no longer a surprise but a serious concern, which probably warrants a frank conversation on what actually leads to the unraveling of these coalition agreements. Is it inexperience when it comes to coalitions, greed, political immaturity, or the love of power?
Well, it's a combination of factors. You have just mentioned one of them. What has happened is that South Africa has had a dominant party system for a very, very long time, dating back to the National Party government, which ruled South Africa for decades. And then after the end of apartheid, we've seen the ANC dominating South African politics again for decades. So this party dominant system has made it very difficult for the multi-party system to work. So in other words, we've not had much experience when it comes to coalition government. And obviously we started to see this in the local government elections in 2016. So it's a relatively new thing. So it doesn't surprise me that it's not working. But I think with time, we're going to see maybe this coalition starting to work.
But what would make them work? Would it be amendments to the electoral legislative framework right now, which seems to be something that many are speaking of currently, that perhaps we need to see that reform there? We know there's the DA's 5-point plan to stabilize coalitions, but we also know that COCTA is basically looking to work on the Municipal Structure Act in that instance, where, for instance, they're looking to stop the walkouts that we're seeing in municipalities. I mean, would that possibly be the way to go, that we look at a legislative framework to stabilize these coalitions?
Yeah, I mean, some of those ideas could work, but I think one of the biggest challenges is the fact that we have a very, very weak and fragmented opposition. So if maybe opposition parties can get their act together and try to, come together and make sure that the opposition is not as weak as it is right now, maybe there could be a chance of making these coalitions work. But also this issue of this narrow opportunistic interest of some of these opposition parties, and obviously a lack of ideological coherence on the part of many parties in the opposition. I think those are some of the contributing factors. But I think probably the most important one is that if you look at South African politics, if you look at the top three political parties, that is the ANC, the DA, and the EFF, you will see that the ideological differences are huge. So it makes it very difficult for these political parties to work together.
Can I just interject there? Just on that score, there are those, when you speak of a lack of ideological coherence, many say, and I listened to the EFF's leader as well, and even the IFP's speaking on the ideology, saying that both of them are in agreement that there should be no ideology at local government. Water is water, just take it to the people, that's all. Should there really be the conversation around ideology at that level, where many just need services?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think probably one of the biggest challenges we have in South Africa is that many people go into politics not because they want to serve, but they go to politics because they want to benefit from the system. So they want to accumulate their wealth, they want to enrich themselves instead of serving. So it would be easier if our leaders, if many of them were in leadership positions because they want to serve, they want to promote the interest of the country. But what we have seen over the years is that many of them are not in these positions because they want to serve, but because they want to enrich themselves. So it's not just the issue of ideology, but it's also the issue of people who figure that they cannot get jobs in the private sector. Maybe they lack the skills, so they go into politics because that's the only employment they can secure for themselves. And which is why we're also seeing a lot of political killings in South Africa. It's because people are desperate. They want to make sure they have stable jobs. So politics provide them with that opportunity.
You paint a very dismal picture, meaning the power then must be taken back to the electorate. What would the electorate need to do to remedy this problem? Because if you've said that politicians are going in for different reasons, they don't have common goals, so what would the electorate have to do in this instance? Because at the heart of it is just a desire for some sort of stability in these municipalities.
Look, I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is not unique to South Africa, but I think it's more of a challenge in developing countries such as South Africa, is that our voters are not equipped to hold representatives accountable. So it becomes a challenge for voters to hold representatives accountable when they have not been equipped. So that our elections become reduced to a popularity contest. So you find that a person loves the ANC. So they'll continue voting for the ANC regardless of what some of the leaders in the ANC are doing. And similarly, those who love the EFF would do the same thing. So it's a popularity contest. I think one of the things that we need to do is to empower our voters, make them well equipped so that they can do the job of holding representatives accountable.
Then to this interesting debate currently, that of the power that smaller parties wield, which would be disproportionate to their electoral support. An example being Al Jamar with its 3 seats. They now have a mayor. Some have criticized the decision to elect Thapelo Ahmad, saying he didn't necessarily receive the mandate, while others say it's actually democracy at play. We can see the smallest guy having the biggest power in a council. What are your views on just that debate?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, it's confusing to a person who does not understand politics how a small party that won, say, 3% of the votes can have a leader of that party securing the position of deputy mayor or mayor for that matter. Because, the idea is that democracy, it's a numbers game. So a person who gets 3% has not been given the mandates to rule. But because you have these coalitions, it's a give and take. One of the things we teach our students in politics is that it's about compromise and consensus. So if political parties agree that a leader of a certain party, even if that party got fewer votes, a small percentage, then like in the case of eThekwini, we had Mavundla, who was the deputy mayor, even though his party received a small percentage of the votes. So it depends on the negotiations between the parties involved.
But it seems some political parties actually have raised concern on this. I listened to the IFP's leader, Mr. Velenkosini. He was somebody that even referred to this phenomena as having token mayors, now also responding to the offer that was given to them to actually put in a mayor in Mogale City, where they said, if we haven't gotten a mandate, we cannot impose ourselves there and be a mayor in that particular municipality. He says relatively what should happen, even if you didn't get the 50+1, but if you relatively got more than the others, then possibly you should be the one to get the first bite at being the mayor. Do you think that is archaic? He's archaic in his thinking. It can literally be somebody with absolutely just 1 seat.
Yeah, I think the problem with democracy is that it becomes a numbers game. So because see, here we're talking about percentages, instead of maybe talking about who is best qualified to lead? Who is best qualified to be a mayor of a city? Who's best qualified to be a member of parliament? But our main focus here is on numbers, so it's a numbers game. And for a country that is still developing, that has many challenges, high unemployment, inequality, and many other problems, load shedding and so on, we are not focusing on getting the right leaders to lead, but our focus is on, okay, so how many percentage did a particular party get, and that gives them the mandate to rule. So it robs us of good leaders. And so as much as democracy is a great thing, but sometimes for countries such as South Africa that are still developing, it sort of robs us of leaders who can take this country forward, who can take this country in the right direction.
But the instability again, Mr. Ndlovu, because it seems it might replicate itself now, is a strong possibility nationally and provincially. So would you still be somebody that is against the idea of some sort of legislative framework here, like what we see in Denmark, your Germany's? If you perhaps had seen the DS 5-point plan where they talk of some sort of an electoral threshold, which is being utilized by the Germany's, for instance, where you need to get either 1 or 2% of the overall vote for you to wield a certain amount of power or have the seats in legislature or council. You don't think that some sort of framework would assist in this respect?
No, definitely. I mean, I think we're going to have to change our electoral system to make sure that we guard against some of these issues that you are raising. And then obviously we have a lot to learn from, international experience, like you mentioned, Germany, Israel, Chile in South America. So we can learn from their experiences because, unlike us, they've had long experience of these coalitions. And so I think it would help us a great deal if we look to what other countries have done to stabilize coalition governments.
As opposed to waiting on politicians to find each other, you impose some sort of legislation on them. Thank you very much, though, Mr. Ndlovu, for joining us this morning. That was political analyst Zakhele Ndlovu. He's a lecturer in politics and public policy at the University of KwaZulu-Natal.